Good morning guys, and welcome to Humpback Rock in Virginia, Shenandoah National Park. Right, so here I am guys, back where I belong in nature. It was a pretty early start for me this morning. I got up at 3 AM to make the 2.5 hour drive to the Humpback Rock trailhead. And fortunately for me, there was only just a few cars at the parking lot when I arrived, which is pretty good because if you guys know me, when I go hiking, I like to go alone and I don't want to see anyone around me. Today, I'm going to be finishing the Humpback Rock Trail, and then later this afternoon, I'm going to hike Sharp Top Mountain, which is just like another hour's drive down south from where I am right now. So that's enough the quick update for me up here on Humpback Rock. I'm just going to now finish the rest of the trail, and then I'm going to continue driving down the Blue Ridge Parkway to Rowanaki, I think that's how you pronounce it, to get some brunch. Alright guys, so I've just finished the Humpback Rock hike and then had to drive for an hour and a half here to Rowanaki, which is a small city, I guess, for some lunch before I do my second and final hike of today, which is Sharp Top Mountain. It seems like it's a good job that I did the hike early this morning because it's raining. I'm not sure about the hike later on this afternoon now, if it's going to continue or get worse. So yeah, I've just found this place to have lunch called The Hatch. So you're just going to have some lunch here and chill out for a bit and pray for the rain to stop. Within 5 minutes of me getting out the car and starting the hike, when it was pretty much stopped raining, it started picking up again. It's not so bad, just kind of like medium-ish type rain. I'm going to get to the top of Sharp Top Mountain and see the views. Hopefully, and this is kind of nothing I can do about, if I can find a spot to review one of my sessions from last week, I'll do it there. Hopefully, if I can find a spot where my phone's not going to get drenched in rain. After an hour and a half, it looks like I've made it to, well, pretty much the summit of Sharp Top Mountain. Let's summit together, shall we? Well, the visibility's poor, but at least it stopped raining. Right, this is the summit, and this is the beautiful scenery behind me. Yeah. Well, like I said, at least it's not raining, but that's gonna suck after summiting a mountain to see like a glorious view and like can't see jack. Zero visibility. But I promise you, I am at the summit of Sharp Top Mountain. Right, here we are guys, the summit of Sharp Top Mountain. I apologise that you can't actually see much, but rest assured I am just as disappointed as you guys are. So after I finished hiking Humpback Rock, I then drove to Rowanaki, where I went to Hatch. I got myself a well-deserved hearty breakfast. There was not really much going on in that town, and also it was raining pretty hard. So pretty much after I finished lunch, I then just drove straight to the trailhead for Sharp Top Mountain. Quite an easy hike, quite different to Humpback Rock. One small part of the trail was very steep, and then the rest of the way is just a very long, minor, gradual decline, whereas this hike was more moderate and sustained all the way through. Didn't see anyone up here, which you shouldn't be surprised given it's a weekday afternoon, it's relatively cold, and it's also raining. Right, so the session that I want to go through in this video was the session that I played last Saturday. In this game, pretty early on, the table agreed to a $10 straddle. So pretty much for the whole of this session, we are going to be playing 2-5-10. It's been actually about a couple of hours of being card dead before we came across this hand. We just couldn't find any spots and we weren't really finding many playable hands to work with. So in this first hand, the action folds all the way to me on the button and I look down at ace-8 offsuit. So I make the standard open to $30. The action then folds to the big blind who makes the call, the straddler folds, so we are now going heads up to the flop. The dealer puts out 8-8 ace rainbow, so we've pretty much flopped the joint. Villain quickly decides to check, and now the action's on us. In this spot, I think both lines are valid in terms of betting or checking, and if we do decide to bet, we can actually use 3 different bet sizings. We can go for a small bet, a medium bet, or a large bet. If we had an 8x or even like a strong ace-x type hand, we could try to go for 3 medium streets of value versus weaker ace-x hands. In terms of the type of hands that we'd be going for small sizings here, I think weak ace-x hands here would make a lot of sense to target some of his pocket pairs, and we would also be mixing in some of our king-x and queen-x type hands as a bluff here, as I don't think these hands also need to bet too big to fold out his complete air. So all that, in my opinion, is more from a theoretical perspective. However, in this case versus this exact opponent who I perceive to be a rec player who hasn't been defending his blinds nor defending versus c-bets as often as I've perceived, I decided to play this hand very tricky and check back. So we are now off to a free turn card, and on the turn the dealer puts out an offsuit 9. Villain decides to check twice, and now the action is again back on us. Following the logic which I had outlined on the flop, if we were trying to target an ace-x hand, I think most likely we were to get maximum 2 streets of value, and if villain did have an 8x hand, then we're most likely going to be seeing a raise on the turn or the river here, and given stack sizes, I think villain had like $600, I don't think we would have too much trouble getting all the money in. On the turn here, I decided to put in a delayed c-bet of $20. In hindsight, I think I would have preferred to size up just a little bit here. It's not too big of a deal, however, I do think this is a mistake. Villain then doesn't think for too long before making the call, which is great news for us. So we are now off to the river card, and the river, the dealer puts out an offsuit 3, which is pretty much complete brick. Villain now decides to check for a 3rd time, and in this spot, in my mind, I'm pretty much just exactly targeting like a weak ace-x hand. Now, in terms of sizing, I don't think I want to go for a large bet here, just in case if villain did have like a weak 8x hand, that he might be tempted to just flat call rather than putting in a raise. It would kind of make sense if villain did have like a weak 8x hand, like an 8-7, 8-6, 8-5, versus a large river bet. I think the most sensible decision to make would be to just check call. However, if I do put in a small bet, then not only will it make it easier and make it more likely that our bet's going to get called by an ace-x hand, it will also open the door for a check raise in case villain did have an 8 in his hand. After thinking all of this through, I decided to put out a bet of just $60, quietly praying for villain to put in a check raiser. Villain doesn't think for too long, he confirms what the bet sizing is before then announcing a call and putting in the chips. I table my hand and villain's like, is that all?
That's it? That's all.
Brilliant.
Thanks, mate.
Right, in this next hand, we have an open from under the gun to $30. The action then folds all the way to me on the button, and I look down at 8-6 of diamonds. Now, this player in question is an unknown player to me, and I think he's got like 1.5k. So in this case, I decide to continue with a flat call. Small blind, big blind, and the straddler all make the fold, so we are now going heads up to the flop. And on the flop, it comes pretty good. The flop comes 8-7 deuce with 1 diamond. We flop ourselves top pair with a backdoor flush and straight draws. Villain starts with a check, which is pretty normal on this board, as this flop should favour our range much more heavily than the under the guns range. If we were going to face a bet, we were going to be calling, and if we were going to face any checks, we were definitely going to put in a bet. So in this case, I decided to put in a bet of $30. Villain then doesn't think for too long before making the call. I think for the sizing that I've chosen here, villain should still be continuing with his overcards such as ace king, ace queen, also including some hands such as jack 9 suited, jack 10 suited, and also on some frequency some big pocket pairs. So we're now off to the turn card, and on the turn the dealer puts out a 9 of spades. Villain now checks twice, and the action is now on us. Although this turn card does improve the strength of villain's range, it also does improve my perceived range as well. So in this case, this card is relatively value neutral. Now, in terms of deciding whether or not we want to continue betting or not, I think if the turn came like a diamond, I would lean more in favour of putting in another bet, just so that if we do bet and we get check raised, we can continue a lot more comfortably. I mean, a flush draw would give us more out, but more importantly, if we do hit a backdoor flush, it's just much more likely that we're going to get paid, as backdoor flushes are a lot harder for villain to put us on, rather than if there was a 4-card straight on the board and we made our hand on the river. So with all of this considered, I decide to check back. We are now off to the river card, and on the river, the dealer puts out an offsuit 5. We now river our backdoor straight. Villain now checks for a 3rd time, which is very unsurprising to me given how this board has ran out. It should be pretty bad for his range. And now the action's on us, And I think in this spot, of course, we have a clear value bet. If we had like a one pair type hand, we would be taking this hand to showdown here, which means that in fact we have very little bluffs on the river here when we do decide to bet. Now in terms of sizing, given how apparently bad it is for the under the guns range and how good it is for us, I think we do want to go for a larger sizing here. So in this case, I decided to put out a bet of $95. Villain then doesn't think for too long before making the call. I table my hand, and then Villain shows 9-6 of spades, also for a rivered backdoor straight. I was really surprised to see Villain open this hand from under the gun, but at least now I know what kind of hands this guy plays from under the gun, and it's all useful information, as I'm sure I'll be playing more hands with him again in the coming weeks. In this next hand, the action folds all the way to me in the hijack, and I look down at pocket jacks. I make the standard open to $30. The button, who is a tight ABC type player, makes the call. The small blind and big blind fold, and the straddler also decides to come along for a call. We are now going 3 ways to the flop, and the flop comes 10, 9, 5, all clubs, and I don't think we have a club in our hand. The straddler quickly checks to me, and in this spot, given we have an overpair without a club in our hand, I think the best play here is to go for a check. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to play a check. The action is now on the button, who thinks for a little while before putting in a bet of $50. The straddler quickly gets out of the way, and the action is now back on us. I think in this spot, if we had the jack of clubs in our hand, that opens the possibility of us playing the check raise. But given that we don't have the jack of clubs, I think the value of our hand is significantly lower, and therefore I decided to keep the pot small and go for a check call. So we are now off to the turn card, and on the turn, the dealer puts out the ace of diamonds. Not a great card for our hand, as not only it could have improved Villain's range if he was barreling with an ace of clubs in his hand. If he did have a hand such as king queen or queen jack with a club, his hand does now improve and gain more equity, and is more likely to double barrel and put us in a tough spot. So the action is now on me, and I think we just have a 100% check spot here. So I decide to play a check, and our button thinks for a little while before deciding to check back, which is obviously great news for us. I think when Villain does take this line, I think more likely than not he's going to have a 10x in his hand, so I am now pretty confident that I have the best hand. So we're now off to see the river card, and the river, the dealer puts out the 6 of clubs. So this board has just run out from bad to worse. So if we were good on the turn, then this river card has just made it less likely that we're good on the river, as the Villain did have a 10x hand with a club. He now has us beat. Similar to our decision on the turn card here, again I think we have a 100% check spot here, so I decide to play a check, and Villain fortunately decides to quickly check back. So I'm pretty certain we have the best hand here, so I table my hand, and then Villain sees we had an overpair to the flop and then quietly mucks his cards. So this was a small hand, but nonetheless still very relieved to be dragging in this pot. Well, it's better than Argentina. It's better than Buenos Aires. What? It's better than Buenos Aires, where they're from, here. In this hand, there is an open from under the gun to $60. So a 6x open raise. The action then falls to the cutoff, who decides to make the call, and then I look down on the button with pocket 10s. Now this is quite an interesting spot. So both under the gun player and the cutoff both have about $600 in their stack. Now my perception of the under the gun player is that he is a rec player. He's been limp calling and limp folding a lot of hands pre-flop. And my perception of him is that when he generally plays high card unpaired hands, such as ace king, ace queen, he often goes for a larger pre-flop opening size. Now for the cutoff, given he's just flattered the undergun's range, I didn't perceive him to be trapping here pretty much ever. So in my mind, I think I'm well ahead of his range. The only players that have me covered here are the players in the small and big lines. With all of this considered, I now need to make my decision on whether I'm going to be calling or 3-betting. If we 3-bet with this hand in this situation, then we are obviously going to be committing ourselves to under the gun and cutoff if they decide to get it all in. But if we do see any 4-bets behind us, then pocket 10s would then become a clear fold. I do lean more towards 3-betting 10s here rather than flatting, as if we do get squeezed behind us and then under the gun jams, then we can no longer continue in this hand. But if we do decide to put in a 3-bet, then it would put either the small blind or big blind, which if they did wake up with a hand such as ace king or queens or jacks, it would put them in quite a tough spot. So after being in the tank for about 30 seconds, I eventually decide to put in a 3-bet to $225. The small blind, who is actually a new friend of mine who I've made in the card room called Frank, now goes deep into the tank. And at this point, of course, I'm now praying for Frank to throw away his hand. He does take about a minute to think about what to do here. He seems really reluctant to fold his hand, which is pretty indicative that he's more likely than not, he's got me beat. And after carefully taking his time to make a decision, he decides to make the fold. The big blind and straddler quickly make the fold, and then the action's back on under the gun. He doesn't seem too pleased with the situation, which is obviously great news for us, before he then, to my surprise, also decides to fold. When I see this fold, then I'm obviously extremely relieved, as I'm now 100% confident that I have the best hand here by a mile. The action's now on the cutoff. He now goes into the tank to decide what he wants to do. Villain starts staring me down. I think he's thinking that he's probably putting me on a hand like ace king, which means Villain would probably have like a smaller pocket pair, which is obviously great for us. And after a little while, Villain decides to jam the rest of his stack in for about $650. And I, of course, snap call. We are now off to see all 5 cards. The dealer puts out the flop, which is like deuce 7-7, which is all clean. The turn comes an ace, and then the river comes an offsuit queen. Villain then tables pocket fives and asks if I've got ace king. And I'm like, I ain't got ace king. And then I table my hand for the winner. On the face of it, doesn't seem like a hand that was too interesting, but only afterwards, when both under the gun and the small blind ended up telling us what happened, I was pretty surprised to learn that the under the gun player folded pocket jacks and Frank in the small blind folded pocket queens. So it's pretty insane, and it all worked out super well for us. We folded out 2 hands that had us beat, and we got the worst hand to commit all of his chips versus us in an all-in pot. Super happy this worked out in our favour, and we get to drag in our first significant pot of the session. Can we back fold?
I thought he was a lot stronger than he was.
I was really afraid of you.
What do you think I had? I don't know, because you opened a 60 there. I don't know what you have there. Well, you're opening a 60 and folding.
Have a good night, baby.
So moving on to this next juicy hand. In this hand, there is an open from middle position to $30. The action then folds to the big blind, who also decides to make the call, and then I look down on the straddle with ace-7 offsuit. So I also decide to defend my straddle with a call. So we are now going 3 ways to the flop, which comes ace-7 deuce with 1 diamond. The big blind quickly checks, and the action is now on us. And as I'm in the tank taking some time to decide what to do, the middle position player had already bet $30 out of turn. I tell the dealer that I've not acted yet, and then I just ask him a question just to confirm what happens if I decide to check if the bet stands, as each card room generally has their own rules. I haven't acted.
It's over there. I was looking at you. You check, his 30 is going to stay.
Oh, okay. So what happens if I bet?
You have all your options. In the event that you check, his 30 has to stay.
Okay. Generally speaking, I really hate it when situations like this happen during a live hand, because it then introduces an unnecessary additional layer of leveling. Because for example, if I do decide to play a check and then the villain's bet would stand, then if I do decide to check call or check raise, my hand just looks so much stronger, which is not ideal, as ideally I would like to conceal the strength of my hand. So after confirming with the dealer that the middle position's bet would stand if I decide to check, I decide to, of course, play a check. And now this is where the hand gets a little strange. Initially, the middle position player had bet $30 out of turn, but after I decide to check, villain now tries to put out a C bet of $80. So when middle position thought I had checked, he was going to bet $30. But when I actually check, he now decides to bet $80. And what happened here just got me really, really confused. So confusing. So you thought I'd check, you bet 30, but when I do check, you want to bet more. Yeah. But anyhow, as the dealer did confirm that the original $30 bet out of turn was going to stand, then the middle position was not able to bet $80 and was instead forced to pay out the $30. Action is now on the big blind, who then makes the call, and in this spot I just decided to continue with a flat call. We are now off to a turn card, and the turn comes an offsuit 7. The big blind checks, and now the action's on us, and given the amount of strength that the middle position player has shown in this hand, I also decided to check the action to him to see what he's going to do on the turn. Unfortunately for us, middle position doesn't decide to check, and instead he decides to put out a bet of $60. The big blind makes the call, and now the action's back on us. Now, looking at stack sizes, the middle position player has about just over $600 left in the stack, and the big blind has about $900. But given that our hand wants to play for stacks, then we definitely need to be putting a raise here at some point to be able to get stacks in by the river. To be honest, I'm a little surprised to see a bet from middle position on this turn card, as I think the 7 should be far better for the big blind and for the straddler's range rather than from the pre-flop aggressor, unless of course middle position had a hand like aces or deuces. And given that there is a flush draw on the board and we are still multi-way, then I don't think we want to be choosing too large of a raise sizing here, as of course we do want all flush draws to continue to the river. So with all this considered, I eventually decide to put in a raise to $210. The middle position then thinks for a little while before eventually deciding to make the call. The big blind reluctantly folds his cards, and we are now going heads up to the river card. The river just comes complete brick, and now the action's on us. We have a crystal clear jam here, so I don't take too long before announcing all in, and then I slide in all of my $100 chips in, and then Villain doesn't take too long before making the call. I table my hand, and Villain quietly mucks his card, which is obviously great news for us, as it means that Villain didn't have pocket aces. And so we now get to drag in a huge pot here. Every Saturday in the poker room, instead of the usual high hand bonus giveaway, they do a mystery seat money giveaway. Essentially, every 20 minutes, they choose a random player in the card room to go for like a raffle draw to win a prize of between $300 to $5,000. And guess what? They called my name out in the poker room. I just won a mystery seat cash bonus. There's like 400 players, and of the 400 I managed to get selected for the cash prize. So I went down, I gave my card, I went to select one of the envelopes, and when I opened it up, it wasn't a 5k, but at least we managed to draw $500. That should hopefully offset the $3 jackpot tax every hand at the poker tables. Right, so back to the poker. In this next interesting hand, the action folds all the way to me on the button, and I look down at 4-7 of diamonds. So I make the standard open to $30, the small blind folds, the big blind folds, and only the straddler makes the call. The villain in the straddle is a new player that's joined the table, and I've noticed that he has joined the table with about $600. So we are now going heads up to the flop, and the flop comes pretty amazing. It comes King 5-6 with 2 diamonds. So we flop ourselves an open-ended straight draw and a flush draw. Villain in the straddle starts with a check, which is pretty normal, and I decide to put in a c-bet of $25. Villain then doesn't think for too long before making the call. We are now off to a turn card, and on the turn the dealer puts out an offsuit 9. Villain decides to check twice, and in this part, given that we have a hand with plenty of equity, I think I really like going for a big bet here to fold out his one pair type hands. And given stack sizes, if I want to be able to comfortably jam rivers, I think we need to go for an overbet here. So this is what I decide to do. I decide to put out an overbet of $130. Villain then takes a little time to notice that I've gone for quite a large bet before nonetheless flicking in the call. So we are now off to the river card, and I'm praying to hit one of my million outs here, and on the river the dealer puts out an offsuit 10. It always really sucks to miss when you have a hand that has so much equity. Villain now decides to check for a third time, and the action is now back on us. In this spot, given the way we've played our hand, we have plenty of value hands here. In addition to our missed straight and flush draws, we also have plenty of strong value hands in this spot, such as sets, 2 pairs, straights, we could have pocket 5s, we could have pocket 6s. Given we have 4-7 of diamonds, we could also easily have 9-6 of diamonds in our range too. And given that we also have one of the worst hands we could possibly have that arrives at the river as played in this way, also makes this hand a really good candidate for bluffing. So in my mind, I was pretty much going to be jamming most rivers here. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to put Villain to the test and jam the rest of my stack in. And now Villain goes deep into the tank. He does take quite a bit of time here, and I am feeling pretty nervous about getting called. But given that I'm pretty comfortable with my decision, I won't be too disappointed if Villain calls, as I'm pretty confident that I've made the right decision. After Villain's been in the tank for about a minute or so, Villain eventually decides to make the fold. And he tables King Jack offsuit for a flopped top pair. So yeah, very pleased to see one of my big bluffs get through, and we get to drag in this hard-earned pot.
Sir, do you want to change the pumpkin?
Sure. Right, now we come on to the last semi-interesting hand of my 2-5-10 session last week. In this hand, I am under the gun and I look down at Jack 9 of hearts. So I decide to make the open to $30. The action then folds to the button, who makes the call. The small blind folds, the big blind makes the call, and the straddler folds. So we are now going 3 ways to the flop, and it comes Ace Jack 4 with 2 diamonds. Big blind checks, and now the action's now on us. To be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what the best line to take with this hand here in this spot. I think I could make arguments for both betting and checking here, especially given that we are multi-way. I think if we were heads up, I'll be more inclined to check, but I think multi-way, I would be more inclined to bet. In this case, I do decide to go for a c-bet of $30. The button makes the call, and then the big blind makes the fold. So we are now going heads up to the turn card, and the turn comes the 8 of diamonds, which completes the front door flush. I decide to slow down with the check, and then villain on the button decides to check back. We are now off to a free river card here, and the dealer puts out an offsuit 9, so we now improve to jacks up. At this point, I've put villain mostly on like a weak ace-x hand, and for this reason, I think if I did decide to check, I think villain is most likely going to be checking these hands back. And given that villain also check back on the turn, I think it's unlikely that villain has a flush. So given that I don't want to risk the hand going check, I do want to try and extract some more value from my hand versus his ace-x hand. And so in this spot, I decide to put in a bet of $75. Villain now goes into the tank, and he's deciding what to do. And from the look of him, I don't think he's deciding whether or not to call or fold. I think it's more, does he want to call or raise? And after taking a little bit of time, villain decides to put in a raise to $200. I've been playing with this villain pretty much the whole session, it's like for the whole 8 hours, and I've seen a lot of the decisions that he's made on the river card, which had then subsequently gone to showdown. And what I had noticed is that villain in question had been playing very honestly on the river. He had been betting and raising with strong hands on the river, and I had always seen him give up with his missed draws. So when I see this raise from villain, alarm bells are obviously ringing. It's really sick given that we did improve on the river here. Just trying to piece together what kind of hand villain could have. I suppose you could even have a hand like ace-8, which wanted to check back the turn for pot control in case I was trapping with the flush. And given my small bet on the river, I think probably made villain confident enough that I probably didn't arrive at the river here with the flush as played. And so he's just trying to extract some more value from my ace-kings, ace-queens type hand. So essentially with this raise, I felt like he had a hand like ace-king beat, so therefore he has 2 pair, and given my 2 pair is probably one of the worst 2 pairs that I could have in this spot, I don't think it's any good. And although 3-betting the river here would be quite a sexy play that probably could actually work every now and then, I just want to be careful of fancy play syndrome, and I just want to be mindful that I don't want to be making these kind of plays too often, as more often than not you're just going to be burning chips. So after a little while I decide to make the fold, and so villain's going to take down this last pot of the session. Right guys, so I just finished my Saturday night session. To be honest with you, I'm quite relieved that I was finally able to book like a proper winning session, I guess. The first week when I played here didn't go very well. You mean, not to blame it on luck or anything, but you know, I've played enough poker now to be able to recognize variance like in my game and variance in results. I think the most interesting hand that I played today was when I 3-bet with pocket 10s on the button. The early position guy, who is a rec player, and I think he only had like $600, so 60 bigs. In my opinion, that should be getting it in as well. I would say their hands were misplayed, in my opinion. I wouldn't say that's down to variance. I think they made the wrong decision. Yeah, just going to make my nice 5-minute drive home. Just chill for a bit, review some of the hands, and then go to bed, and then rinse, wash, repeat. I'll speak to you next time. Right, so that concludes my 2-5-10 session from last Saturday. As you probably would have seen from the hand histories, this session went really well for us. I think we managed to end the session up $2,146, which obviously is great, but what you probably didn't know is that I also had a very bad session on Wednesday last week where I lost almost 2k. So as a summary for the week, I managed to end the week down again, but just $631. I'm still pretty happy with the way I'm playing. I'm still really happy with the player pool, and I'm still pretty confident that I'll be able to start booking some profitable weeks, hopefully soon enough. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Take care and peace.